Jessica Crow. I am the founder of Apogee and the host of Change Leader Insights. And I am so excited because today I have here with me Shana Bosler. She is the Director of Learning and Development for Emergenetics International. Shana, thank you so much for being here. Can you tell the listeners, the people who are watching today's podcast, a little bit more about yourself, how you got to where you are, and what it is that you do at Emergenetics?
Well, I'm really excited to be here, Jessica. It's great to have met you and to introduce this to you. Well, my background, it was actually in psychology. And when I was doing that work, or my undergraduate work in psychology, I was always drawn to how people experience their own worlds and how that applies also in organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So after I graduated, I had the fortunate opportunity to work in a lot of industries like healthcare, nonprofits, for-profits, and academia. And when I was completing my master's degree, I was introduced to Emergenetics via an introductory workshop that was delivered at the university. Up until that point, like many of us, I had taken a lot of different personality assessments.
Mm-hmm.
They were all really interesting. But what Emergenetics offered to me was the different message that regardless of what my results were, they were still perfect.
Yeah.
And what I thought was really helpful is that it just gives us insights into what energizes us and drains us by measuring how we prefer to think and behave. And that these thinking and behavioral differences really help to explain one reason why human beings might experience communication gaps or conflict with people who think and behave differently than we do.
Yeah,
So
I love that.
Yeah. Needless to say, I was hooked right away.
Yeah, I can see why.
Yeah.
And so you've been at Emergenetics for how long now? Yeah, 10-ish years, 12-ish. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I know.
What year is it? 25? Oh my gosh.
I know. Yeah. And so now, I mean, I worked in several different positions, and now I'm fortunate enough to be able to lead the global learning and development team. And some of the other work that I do with the organization is I'm a master trainer. So that go out and train people how to use this tool. And one of my favorite things to do is to work with executive teams to help them understand how to integrate emergenetics theory into their leadership strategy.
Yeah. Oh, that I can see that being really helpful. Well, I was so excited when actually my cousin introduced us, which is really fun. So 6 degrees of separation there. But when he told me about what you do and what Emergenetics International offers and how you support leaders and teams, and how you've supported him and his organization, I was really, really intrigued because, this podcast, it's all about helping people develop the mindset, the skills, the awareness of what it takes to really lead and influence organizational change. And I knew that by understanding, your own behavior preferences and ways of thinking and understanding how other people think and behave, you're going to be more effective leading, or at least speaking to and helping people understand how to move through that process, because you're going to understand their own, their preferences and behavior. So can you walk us through the different quadrants of the assessment? So if I were to take the assessment today, what kind of, what should I be expecting? And I have taken the assessment and it's really fun, by the way. But tell listeners and viewers about the assessment and what to expect once they complete the assessment.
Sure. So what's important to note is that this is a self-assessment, right? So we're having you take a 100-question questionnaire and you are answering it on how you see yourself. The results then share 7 different attributes. 4 of them are how you prefer to think. And then there's 3 that are how you prefer to behave. So the 4 thinking attributes are measuring the windows that you go through, or the doors you go through when you're trying to make a decision. And the behaviors share how you are, or how others experience you in the world.
Yeah.
So the nuance of having 7 attributes gives us a depth of understanding about individuals that many other assessments out there don't provide.
I agree. Having taken many other assessments, I like that a lot. And so keep going. I think I cut you off.
Sure. So the thinking attributes are analytical, structural, social, and conceptual. And then the behaviors are expressiveness, assertiveness, and flexibility. What's important to note is we all have all of the thinking attributes in our brain, and we all have all of the behaviors. we refer to this as the language of grace, right? So we never say somebody is too expressive or not expressive enough.
Right.
It's just measuring how you compare to the population at large,
Yeah.
right? So as an example, you could be third expressive, which is an individual that typically talks to think. We all
Mhm.
know those individuals. And then you could be third expressive, where you might be somebody who thinks before they share.
Yep.
You could also fall right in the middle and flex between the two.
Yeah.
But regardless of where you are, it's not good or bad. It's just how you prefer to behave. And as adults, we're all asked to flex outside of our preferences.
Yes, we
So,
are.
yeah, what's great about the profile is it helps us to understand if we are having to flex quite a bit, that's when we get exhausted.
Yeah. The energy piece. Yep.
Yep.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, and I like this because I know when I've taken other assessments in the past, I've looked at my results and I've thought, oh, I wish I was more of this, or the organization's looking for more of that, and didn't have that perspective. I think you just said the gift of grace or wisdom of grace or something along those lines. And I really appreciate that you're bringing that conversation into this process so people don't feel like they get their results and want to be anything that they aren't, that isn't showing up for them. And I think that also is empowering, because then they can see themselves more clearly and then see how they can interact or need to interact, hold themselves accountable based on where they get their energy and what drains them, but also kind of what's expected in the organization.
Yeah. And Jessica, that's one of my favorite things about when I do this work is, as human beings and adults, I think we get the message that we have to be all things to everybody.
Right. Yes, we do.
and we can do it, but it's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do the trainings, what we say is you don't have to be all things to everybody. You can do it.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the concept of a whole emergenetics team, right? Where we encourage teams to really take a look at the cognitive diversity within their teams to see, where some people fall that others might not or have preferences in, and then encourage that diversity of thought in order to make a more efficient process, right?
Yep.
But then also not to always, if there's only one person, let's say, that has a structural preference, you can't make them do all the structural work, but at least it gives you, it's kind of tempting at times. If
I was imagining, like, I could see that happening if you didn't know better,
Right. But that's kind of the, it's the aha moment for individuals of, especially when you do the workshops, the way that we design them is for people to not only learn about themselves, but then the way that we put people in activities and, experiences that the people that they're working with, they may be on the exact opposite side of the room.
Right.
And
Right.
it's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, no wonder I have no idea what that person's saying, because they're speaking a different language.
It can feel like that sometimes. I mean, I have case studies popping into my head of clients I've worked with or projects I've been on in the past where I have experienced frustration, or I'm thinking, gosh, how nice would it have been if we had known these things about each other, and maybe the frustration wouldn't have been there, or we'd have more empathy, or I don't know, but I know that I have a lot of examples of, I wish I'd known more about how this person, what their preferences are in terms of thinking and behaving. And that could have helped me be more effective in that situation, in the moment, navigating change, and just all the things that happen in the workplace. So I love that.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the intent impact gap?
I've heard of it, but let's talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah. I mean, it was developed by Edith Ning from the University of California, Berkeley. And it's something that we really integrate into our teaching. And that is, a lot of times what we intend to say, we have positive intent in sharing what it is that we want to share. But if somebody thinks or behaves differently than you, sometimes the impact on them is very different than your intention.
Yes. Yes, that resonates.
Then they start to perceive your actions as being, I don't know, negative, or that you're whatever it might be.
Right.
The reality is that wasn't your intention. And so we like to use Emergenetics as a tool to help to close that gap.
Yeah.
as another opportunity.
No, I like that a lot too, because what you're describing in real life, I'm using air quotes, but it is very real. It becomes an impediment to progress. It becomes an impediment to being able to, to innovate or even just to be productive day to day. So I think if I am an individual, one, understanding myself, my preferences is going to be helpful to help me navigate and more effectively my intent versus impact. And then if I'm a leader of a team or in an organization, I can see that being really effective too, understanding the preferences and ways of thinking and behaviors. What are some cautions though? Like before we got on the podcast, we were going through my results and, we don't want to say, oh, I'm not a structured thinker, for example, therefore I get a pass on being organized. Like, so there's some, can you tell us a little bit more about some of the ways you don't want to think about using this information?
Yeah, it's a really good point. We always say you can't use your profile as an excuse. That we have all of the attributes in our brain that we can access. Some of the cautions, especially introducing this new to organizations, is people using it, almost in a snarky way.
Yeah.
Where you've gained trust, or let's say you're working with a team that's still working on trust. That's why we emphasize the language of grace. If you honor somebody else's thinking and behavior and you honor your own, there's more likelihood that there will be that trust there.
Yeah.
To learn and work better with each other. So that's one of the cautions, right? That we, or the other caution is we don't pigeonhole or put people in boxes.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So one person and another person might have the exact same profile on paper, but there's other things that come in to play on how people, go about their worlds, like birth order.
Yeah.
Might be
things happening at home,
power,
Yeah.
So we always encourage people to remember that this is just one nuance of who you are.
Yeah.
A lot of other things about who you are that influence the way that you go about your world. We have over 500 different thinking and behavioral profile combinations in our database. And that's another thing I love is that if somebody thinks, oh, well, this attribute correlates with another one, we can disprove it by looking at the stats, right?
Yeah. That's helpful. And I think that just reinforces the diversity of thought and the value of having these different profiles and that there are so many different ones. If I'm the leader of let's say the team is fairly well established, but we're about to undergo a major change, what value could you see in investing in something like this, either for yourself or for your team? How could it help you navigate that change more effectively? And I know a lot of the stuff we've set up to this point would lend itself towards the answer yes, but in any other ideas or examples on how this could be supportive to an organization, to a team that's ready to embark on something that's going to take a lot of mindset shifts and process shifts and all those things. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is if you're embarking on a change, you want all players to be involved.
Yes.
You don't want some to not be involved and others to, be involved. And we actually have a resource that helps to describe how all of the attributes deal with change or what they or change.
Yeah.
So as an example, if you're thinking about the analytical attribute, you've got to get valid data for why the change is happening.
Yeah.
You need to be able to ask. Somebody with an analytical preference needs to be able to ask why the change, and you need to be able to give them valid reasoning behind it, and it's logical. Structural attribute might want to know how are we going to roll this out, right? What are the steps to make this happen? Social wants to know who's going to be involved, who will this impact? And conceptual will say, well, can we look at this differently?
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. Well, and it's also all the different aspects of change management. Like those are the things you have to think about.
Right.
Excuse me, as somebody who's leading change. And so understanding that with actual data would be helpful.
Right. And then if you see somebody that's either on board with the change or maybe resistant to the change, can have conversations through their report, their results, to understand where that's coming from.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
The flexibility example that you and I were talking about prior to this call, that were really a light bulb went off, because that identification of resistors and, doing resistance management. I have wanted to change the narrative around resistance for years. And I always think about, like, it's not resistance is normal, but what we're talking about, and I like how Emergenetics has really defined it as a way of thinking and behaving, that they're committed to, I'm going to say, the status quo because of it being a well thought out decision, or it's worked well. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're resistant. It's just that they have a lot of data points, or you can explain it better than me. This is what you do for your job. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So what you're referencing is the behavior of flexibility, right?
Yeah.
And I think in the Western culture, if you are somebody who takes on change quickly, you're seen as like, that's the best thing to be, right?
Early adopter, change influencer. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, flexibility in our tool is measuring how you respond when a change is imposed upon you and didn't have a choice in it. All right. So we talk about our behaviors in thirds. First third, flexible. These are the individuals that would be obviously between 0 to 33 if they score there. These are the individuals that will get on board with change, but they want to know why the change is happening. And they may need more time to get on board, like to process it, because they're energized by pushing the original decision forward. There's a gift in that, because a lot of times the first decision was the right decision.
Right.
And sometimes these folks, like you said, could be perceived as resistors. Well, I would argue that they're bringing a gift to the organization, because by pushing forward that original decision, you're freeing up time to do the other things that need to be happening.
Right. No, that's a really good way of looking at it. I like that.
And then, of course, on the third end of the spectrum, these are the folks that are usually get on board with change pretty quickly. They're actually energized by change, keeping options open. So the gift in that is that, of course, they might be perceived as the change cheerleader.
Yeah.
And when things aren't working out very well, these are the folks that might bring in the options. Like, well, this seems like we're stuck. Could we consider this thing that's on the
right? Yeah.
So that having that spectrum of flexibility on your team can be really helpful in honoring that spectrum, right? So when you know what your team looks like from a flexibility standpoint, you can understand why the first third might be pausing before jumping on board, and why the third is ready to go. But good or bad, they both add a lot of value to the dynamics, especially in a change management situation.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying all of that. That's super helpful. And is there a correlation between somebody's thinking preferences and then how they show up from a, behavior, or, is there a correlation there? Like, if you're more of a conceptual thinker, do you have a tendency to be more of a, more flexible or not? And I don't know if there is one, or if there's a strong correlation. Have you seen that in the, I guess, the analysis that your company's done?
So one of the things I'm really proud of about this tool is that our technical report is available for anybody to see, right? On the website. And there is no correlation, statistically significant correlation between the attributes and the behaviors. And that's one that we are a valid tool, scientifically valid tool. And I love that, because you make the assumption, Jessica. I mean,
I did.
People that have a lot of yellow in their brain, conceptual as a preference, may tend to be more third flexible.
Right.
Well, this is not science-based, so please don't, I didn't go and research this, but in my work with this tool, I often find that people that have a lot of yellow in their brain tend to be more third flexible.
Interesting. Yeah.
Which helps them when they've got all these ideas from the conceptual.
Yeah.
Consider how to do things differently. Once they've landed with that flexibility, that tethers those balloons. That's a phrase we use all the time.
Yeah.
Stay with the course, right? So it's it's not a strategy because it's a preference.
Right.
Found that frequently again. But if you look at our technical,
Total. Yeah. That's so interesting. Well,
yeah.
I appreciate that very much because my own results, I was strong in the conceptual, but very middle of the road and everything else. And
Yeah.
I think when I initially took the test, I for sure made some assumptions on how it would correlate, but having you say that and recognizing that there's, the way that you use this information in the workplace setting there's so many layers to it. I really like that you can approach how you engage from many different perspectives to bring people along. Very cool. Anything else that you would like to share with people who are listening and watching this show about the power of emergenetics and doing an assessment like this for yourself and for your team, or just even more broadly, how to think about effectively leading and guiding people through change and transformation?
Well, I think more and more, I mean, since the pandemic and people having to work from home and, I think we're experiencing as leaders the impact of that disconnection.
Yeah.
And the more information you can have about the people, the human beings that are influencing and impacting and making your company work, the better. And again, when I talk about emergenetics, it's a strengths-based assessment. We're not a place where people are going to learn and feel bad about themselves. It's more just how do they get energy and where might they be drained? I'm not sure if you're familiar with the fifth industrial revolution that's now breathing down our necks, but
it's right here. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? I thought we were just in the fourth industrial revolution. Hold on a minute. But that human aspect of the fifth industrial revolution, we, from an emergenetics standpoint, can significantly impact in a positive manner. That gets me really excited, right? Because human beings aren't going away.
God, I hope not.
Still need to take care of ourselves and understand ourselves to be a productive member of society and feel good about the work that we're doing.
I agree. And I think this is a really powerful tool to help us do that. And even if we just take it on our own, I think there's so many insights we can glean from it. But I really love the idea of doing something more broadly and understanding people, especially with remote work and all the different hybrid scenarios. So Shana, this was really, really informative. I love this tool and assessment, and also just some of the what you're putting out there in terms of grace and intent and impact. And honestly, it sounds like compassion. I was thinking of the word compassionate leadership, and how do we be more compassionate leaders? So thank you so much for your time and for the information that you've shared. Where can people find either you or learn more about your organization? What's the best way to kind of get in touch or reach out for more details?
Well, our website is emergenetics.com. So that's easy, except the way you spell it. So I'm sure you'll be able to see that on your podcast.
Yep. And on the post, don't worry. Yeah.
And of course, I'm on LinkedIn. So it's, Shana Bosler. Happy, to respond to questions, etc.
Cool.
So we'd love to hear from people.
Wonderful. Well, I will have all of that in the post and show notes. Thank you so much for your time today, and have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thanks, Jessica.